Okay, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back. So Twitter erupted yesterday when Jon Jones and Tom Aspinall went back and forth. Right, Tom Aspinall is a UFC interim heavyweight champion. He defeated Sergey Pavlovich. Tom Aspinall is from the UK, from the Manchester area, right? And now he's been crowned the interim champion of the UFC. Jon Bones Jones is the well, you could say allegedly the undisputed heavyweight champion, although it is in dispute, right? So I'll give you a bit of a quick backstory for some of you that don't know. Jon Jones was out for 3 years when Francis Ngannou was calling him out 24/7, wanted to fight him. And everyone in the UFC wanted to see Jon Jones versus Francis Ngannou. Jon stayed out for 3 years. As soon as Francis left, his contract has expired. He left the UFC. And everyone knew he was leaving the UFC because he told everyone 2 to 3 years before, he said, I'm not going to be signing a contract unless the UFC allow me to go and box. Right? The UFC point blank said they weren't going to allow it. Dana White said they weren't going to allow it. So we knew in 2 years' time, Francis would have been gone. So Jon knew if he wanted a legacy fight, he had to get in there quickly, right, to fight Jon Jones. Jon didn't do that. So Francis sat outside Jon's house for 3 years and Jon refused to come out. Finally, when Jon does come out, when Francis is gone and the coast is clear, he takes on Ciryl Gane. Now, Ciryl Gane was beaten by Francis Ngannou in his last fight. Francis Ngannou had a torn ACL, so he beat Ciryl Gane with one leg. Jon went out there and smoked him, no doubt, right? Strategically picked a guy he knew would be an easy stylistic matchup. The UFC also obviously accommodated him with this. So Jon's basically the champion, right? Won the belt off of beating a guy that got beaten by the legitimate champion who's in Francis Ngannou. So a lot of MMA fans still see Francis Ngannou as the lineal heavyweight champion. Now, how do you get rid of that? How do you get rid of that stigma? What you do is you get two of the best in the division and you get them to fight for a vacant title, right? And then that gives a little bit of solidarity to the champion, right? Say, right, he's beaten the best. These two are the best, and they're beating. One's come out on top. Now you defend against the next best thing, right? The next guy coming up, and then that's how you create a new lineage. And then no one's going to look at Francis Ngannou as a champion because the best are fighting the best. But when you got Jon Jones, right, who wants to fight Stipe Miocic, right, not Tom Aspinall, he wants to fight Stipe Miocic, right? The fight was lined up before Aspinall became the interim champion. But the UFC, this is what the UFC did. They put an interim belt out there, which they did the same thing with Francis Ngannou. They put an interim belt out there, right? I bet they're kicking themselves now and wishing they never did that. But they put an interim belt out there. Tom Aspinall won the belt. Now, hardcore UFC fans, not the fanboys of Jon Jones, see Tom Aspinall as the real champion. He wants to fight Jon Jones. If Jon Jones refuses him and wants to fight, and goes on to fight Stipe, for me and a lot of other fans, it then legitimizes Tom Aspinall's belt, right? As to say he's the top man here because Jones just wants to fight subpar opposition. No disrespect to Stipe, but he hasn't fought in 4 years, and the last time he fought, he was viciously knocked out by Francis Ngannou. So he's no competitor in the heavyweight division, right? So Jon wants to fight Ciryl Gane, beat Ciryl Gane to win a belt, and then defend against Stipe and believes that's legacy, right? We're going to talk about Jon's legacy. Jon's legacy was built up off of fighting old men, right? Old men, yes. Jon was 23, a young buck, cutting from a considerable amount of weight down to light heavyweight, right? He's a lot bigger than a lot of the guys that are light heavyweight, and a lot of the guys that he beat were coming up from middleweight, right? Or either coming up from middleweight or went back to middleweight. I.e. Chael Sonnen, Lyoto Machida, Vitor Belfort, Shogun Rua, need I mention much more, right? These were a lot of old guys who Jon beat. And the thing is, the reason Jon's excuse as to not fighting Aspinall is Aspinall hasn't fought anyone, he hasn't beat anyone, right? He's beating everyone there is out there at the moment right now. When you was 23, Jon, and you was coming up for a title shot, you didn't hear Shogun Rua saying Jon hasn't beaten anyone. He needs to go and build up his resume before he fights me. No, he didn't say that. Because back then, it was a real fighting. It was the best fight the best, no matter who. There was no A-sides, B-sides, or nothing like that. It was like best fight the best. Now the UFC have turned into some media machine and some propaganda machine. They now want to try to manipulate the fans for pay-per-view numbers and also to build up the legacy of Jon Jones, because Francis Ngannou left the UFC as the most terrifying heavyweight that the world has ever seen, right? And now they want to try and put Jon, like replace Jon with Francis Ngannou, but it ain't gonna happen. Not in my eyes, it ain't gonna happen. So I'm gonna read out a little tweet that Jon's put out there. You're gonna read out a little tweet he's put out there to the fans, right? Because the fan must have messaged him and says, retiring after Stipe confirmed then, Jon, because he wants to retire after Stipe. So the big question, the big thing is, if you want to retire after Stipe, then you don't need to have the belt. Just give the belt up and we'll make this an old veterans fight, right? A fight between two veterans, former light heavyweight champion and former heavyweight champion, right? That's what we'll bill it as. And let Tom Aspinall become the, you give up the belt by default, give it to Tom Aspinall and he becomes the undisputed heavyweight champion. And he can go on and start defending the belt against the top guys in the division. Excuse me. So, Jon Jones, the fan, Sean Nadine says, retiring after Stipe confirmed, question mark. Jon replies, no, not saying that, but you're not being clear, Jon, right? What I'm saying is coming back from 2 different surgeries and defeating Stipe is my primary goal. And a huge feat. I'm going to go back and rebuttal some of this. If you ask me, we both already agreed to massive contracts. A win for either one of us would be absolutely massive for our careers, despite how good Tom may seem right now. No, Tom's good right now. A win over him really does nothing for my legacy, but just the truth. That's all I'm saying. I understand a lot of you guys don't fully understand what's happening behind the scenes. No, no, we don't. You don't make it this far. You don't make it this far as myself and Stipe and not realizing the business side of it. Right, I'm going to go back to what he says, right? Because rebuttal some of the things he says. He's come back off surgery. Defeating Stipe is his primary goal. Okay, that's your primary goal, and a huge feat. No. Stipe hasn't fought for 4 years, so it's not a huge feat. And he was coming off of a knockout loss to Francis Ngannou, the man that you ran away from for 3 years. Right, you both agreed massive contracts. A win would be even massive for either one of your careers. Possibly, okay. Despite how good Tom may be right now. No, Tom's good right now, right? Tom is good right now, and he's a man that's in form, right? He's a younger man, stronger, fitter man. Hasn't been off for 4 years, been fighting all the top competition. He's the harder fight right now, make no mistake. Stipe coming off of a 4-year layoff after getting knocked out by Ngannou is not the harder fight, right? Trust me, he's not the harder fight. And Jon knows this as well. That's one of the reasons why he wants to take this fight, and one of the reasons why the UFC are trying to lay him up a fight. And this is, we've seen this before in Jon, right? This is not nothing new. The fans, right? The fans and the UFC had to literally force him to fight Dominic Reyes, right? Dominic Reyes had to go through so many trials and tribulations to get the fight with Jon Jones. The fans basically forced Jon by calling him a duck, right? That's how basically Dominic Reyes got the fight. And if you go and watch the fight, arguably a lot of people said that Jon lost the fight. All right, we only have to go back one fight more with Thiago Santos, and a lot of people felt that Jon didn't win that fight either. Santos was on one leg, Jon couldn't take him down, and that was one of the reasons why I said Jon wouldn't beat Francis Ngannou, because I don't think he could take him down. Right, he took down a lot of small guys. Thiago Santos, again, another middleweight, yeah. Anthony Smith, another middleweight that Jon beat. His whole legacy was beating middleweights. A guy that's 6'5" tall, cutting his body down, weight bullying a lot of these small middleweight guys that moved up to light heavyweight. That's Jon's legacy. So if Jon can beat a proper heavyweight, in form, right, heavyweight, who's in the top of his game right now in Tom Aspinall, for me that does way better than it does to beat someone like Stipe Miocic, right? I was listening to the Pain Game with True Geordie. He was saying, he basically put a comment out there saying that it was the first time it's ever happened where a champion is not going to fight the interim champion, is going to fight someone who he wants to fight, and not the real not the real guy. But it has happened in the case of Tony Ferguson versus Conor McGregor, where Tony Ferguson was the interim champion and Conor McGregor was the champion coming off of the Floyd Mayweather fight and was supposed to fight Tony, and Conor refused. And Conor refused to make the fight. The UFC did not strip him. What they did is they made a fight between Khabib Nurmagomedov and Tony Ferguson. And the fans and the media were asking, well, what's going to happen? We've never seen an interim title get defended before. How is that going to work? Will Conor be stripped? The UFC did not want to answer that question. Now I'm going to ask the UFC, and I'm going to ask you fans to question the UFC. What happens now? Does Tom Aspinall now take on he has to fight sooner or later. Does he now take on a fight with another heavyweight and have to defend an interim title? Where that's never happened in UFC before. And, this ain't boxing, man. Come on. In boxing, they defend interim titles, not in the UFC. I thought it was the best fight, the best. This is where the brand of the UFC is slipping for me right now. It's not the best fight, the best no more. It's how much pay-per-views we can do and how much we can prop up Jon Jones' legacy. But anyway, enough said. Smash the like button, hit the bell for notifications to get all the new latest videos.